Mount Ararat at 4,630 meters altitude, Part 3. Noah's Ark did not land in that rock crevice or cavern at 4,630 meters altitude on Mount Ararat. It fell into that cavern sometime in its past. It fell into that cavern from a higher altitude and above that cavern entrance. The evidence of this is the debris field above the cavern entrance, where among that debris, most probably of its hull, there are shapes of things which appear as boxes and animal cages, and other material from the ship. This other material, which appears as metal, I will explain in another episode. The debris fields you see in these pictures proves that the ship was above the cavern entrance for some time, and then sometime later it fell into that cavern. I took some measurements of these box-type shapes. This big box-type thing has these measures: 3 meters width, 4 meters height. If this were to be an animal cage, then whatever animal it contained was the size of an adult elephant. These other ones have measures that vary from half a meter to 1 meter, and are most probably cages for smaller animals. But are they animal cages? The structure in the cavern is visibly a ship, and it could be Noah's Ark, since there is no record of any other ship-type structure on Mount Ararat, especially at that height at 4,630 meters altitude. The Bible does not say at what altitude of Mount Ararat the ship landed, but it is written that the Great Flood was a global event. To find the ship on Mount Ararat, which is the area where in the Bible the ship rests, at 4,630 meters altitude, would mean that the Great Flood was a global event. And because the Great Flood was a global event, Noah's Ark was built to carry pairs of every animal species on Earth. The Ark today is at 4,630 meters altitude in a cavern on Mount Ararat. To have a ship at that altitude would mean that the Great Flood covered the planet under 5 kilometers of water, and not some local event that covered the Mesopotamia area. That ship on that altitude, and a ship of that size with animal cages up to 4 meters high, Noah's Ark was not just carrying cows, sheep, and chickens, but wild animals of every species. To have pairs of wild animals on a ship to preserve the species would mean that the Great Flood, at the very least, covered entire continents. The presence of all these animal cages and debris of what could be broken animal cages and broken hull over the top of this cavern shows that Noah's Ark for some time was above that cavern entrance, and the presence of that waterfall you see in these blurry lines proves that till recently there was a glacier that covered the cavern entirely, but today the glacier disappeared. Noah's Ark fell into this cavern in some past after having resided for some time in a glacier, that moving over this side of Mount Ararat, carrying with it Noah's Ark, found this cavern. The ship, being gradually pushed over the rock ground by this glacier, found this cavern and then fell completely inside of it. The glacier that had housed Noah's Ark then gradually covered the cavern's entrance, hiding it from all human eyes, probably for thousands of years, until recently, because of global warming, and probably till only a few months ago, the glacier completely melted away, exposing Noah's Ark in plain sight. The ship went above the cavern's entrance, and inside the glacier, its bottom hull was touching the rock ground, and while the glacier moved, it moved the ship with it, having it scrape its bottom hull over the rock ground. Parts of its hull broken off, as in these pictures, emptying its contents of animal cages, and the debris of broken animal cages, as in these pictures. But this structure here, for example, standing up in vertical position, does not appear as something from the ship's bottom hull, but from its right starboard side, explaining why some of these animal cages are intact. The ship being gradually pushed by a glacier pushed the ship on its right starboard side, breaking the hull, creating these chunks of its hull on the ground, while most of that debris of broken, unrecognizable things could be pieces of the bottom hull the bottom hull scraping over the rock ground, while the ship was being gradually pushed towards the cavern. Noah's Ark in the cavern appears very damaged, and I believe that most of the damage is on its right side from bow to superstructure, and half of this area is standing up over the rock wall of the cavern at the ship's right, little visible because under rock shadows. From the bow to superstructure, half of the ship port area is at the rock bottom of the cavern, laying over an ice shelf on the ship's left. The other half, from bow to superstructure, is laying over the rock wall on its right starboard area. I do not think that the ship split into two halves, but that the ship falling down the rock bottom of this cavern, or maybe the correct word would be slided down to the rock bottom. At some point it just stopped its fall. Its port left side reached the cavern's bottom, while the rest of it remained hanging over the cavern's wall on the ship's starboard right side. In time, the cavern covered itself with ice, and tons of ice over the ship's roof caused further damage, such as collapsing front decks and these holes you see on its front decks. There is severe damage to its superstructure. That I will explain in another episode. The ship inside this cavern not only appears twisted from the bow to superstructure, with its port left side having touched the rock bottom, and its right starboard side laying over the rock wall on its right, but sections of the ship have detached themselves, as you see in these pictures, offering close-ups of what Noah's Ark looks like and how it was built. Sections of the ship built separately and then all joined together. The ship is broken and dismembered. Parts of the ship are uphill over the cavern's entrance, while the rest of the ship is downhill at the cavern's bottom. But someone would say, but what if this is not Noah's Ark, but some other ship, or maybe not even a ship? Well, along with what I said before, that there is no record of anything other than Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat and of this size, and especially at this altitude. There are debris fields of what appears as animal cages all around this ship-like structure. But there is also something else important of this ship-type structure, that it is completely coated in pitch.